What an exciting game 2 coming out of this series, man. I can't believe Immortals Academy were able to pull out game 2 versus Dignitas Academy and look like a completely different team. What are your thoughts, Golden Boys?
I wasn't ready for it, man. But yeah, they look like a completely different machine. I think, for starters, banning the Lee Sin, smart move. Will didn't look like he had as much agency when he was on that Viego. And the early game, really, what it really just comes down to is both Joey on the Thresh, how disgusting these hooks were, and Viper on the Camille, his early game pressure, 314, having a kill, having an assist, getting first brick, and loads of turret plays. What really impacted this early game to just go firmly in the hands of Immortals.
I've kept saying from the beginning that a lot of this game was going to be decided by how both IMTA and Will divide up the resources. Who are they going to pay attention to? Well, I think that becomes so much of a non-factor when you find that the team actually pays attention more towards Ender, when he can just roll around the entire map. So, roll me like a 3-man death squad between the Jarvan, the Aphelios, and the Thresh, right? They're taking every fight as they see it, and Dig not able to respond to it at all. Do you find that they felt like so early on? Honor was consistently denied resources from Will to in the jungle. He was not allowed to farm, bro. Every time he stepped into the blue side quadrant, bro, your jungle? No, your jungle? No, our jungle immediately. As he takes everything away from him, as he can do nothing. So Immortals right now, I think, have a really solid game plan. The best part about all this, my fun theory on these things is that they had both Camille and Jarvan, which is what I like to call 2 out of the 5 Olympic rings that are present in the game. If you also add a Galio to that mix too, you get 3 rings out of those circles, and eventually I'll get all 5 circles in one game, but for now, you only get 2 circles in this competition.
And someone else you have to talk about it is going to be pretty on his LeBlanc, because he looked spectacular on that Blanc. The assassinations he's able to get, his use of the chains, how patient he was with a lot of these plays is what really fueled the mid game for Immortals to be as dominant as they were. And that channel of resources flowing all the way to Keith at the very end onto that late game of Aphelios, he scaled, he got online, and Immortals were able to protect him. No one can get onto the back line to stop Keith. I called him a little bit of feast or famine. This was a feast. He ate until he was beyond full. That was a belly buster right there.
It was a lot to take in, and quite honestly, I'm excited to see what happens in Game 3, because now we're at a 1-to-1 series between Dignitas Academy and Immortals Academy. If there's something that Dignitas wants to change up, how do they bring back the magic from Game 1?
You just send a page over to Immortals coach, say, please, we'll pay you some extra, don't ban Lee Sin. Let Will have that champion. Some things definitely got to swap up a little bit. You can tell that Immortals are very comfortable with that Aphelios and Thresh. That's one of the things that's going to stick out to me, because in Game 1 and Game 2, that was their first pick on red side. And you can kind of see why. When you had the Alistair picked up by JJ early on, the first blood that went on, using that gravitum gun to be able to set up the death sentence, that combo was beautiful. And the fact that you have the top side of your map for the early to mid game, the bottom side of the map is meant for that late game. If you get Keith onto that Aphelios and get him to scale to that late game, he is a threat if he can get there. And that is a big if, because that has been picked up early in the draft both times. I'm going to wonder if Dignitas are going to start to see it and try and get Keith onto something more uncomfortable.
But that's the biggest thing here, Destruction. Dig wasn't able to even really get there. You saw with a lot of their dives, things were a little bit spaced out, you could say, right? One might even call it discombobulated. Because considering it went in one after another, and it was always either you saw maybe the Gnar was a bit too far, maybe JJ was able to follow up, and the rest of the team was always somehow left along the sidelines, where even in the middle of the fight, Will never really able to get one solid reset off, and then you're kind of just stuck in this back and forth where you have 2 mid-team fights at the Dragon, where all these low health bars and Pretty is disgustingly strong, and you think, wow, you were mentioning how everybody was going to eat, bro. Pretty was eating that game. My man had a buffet of 300 gold champions, deciding now which one am I gonna scoop up first and put onto my plate. Answer being almost all of them was his choice. And after that too, you saw just how Dig, they're playing really in this world back and forth style. We're thinking, do we go in, do we not go in? So that's one thing I definitely want to see like cleaned up from the going into this game. Like, you know, if you all want to commit to one thing, do it. Be together, as even, you know, Joshi and Anderson, we were saying before as well. Be friends together as one.
Yeah, and when we go back to game number 1, that's what we saw a lot from Dignitas. It's one of the things that I really admired in that game number 1 from how they were able to play it. They made decisions as a team. They concentrated as a team. One of the later team fights that we saw, I forget when it was. It was like somewhere past the 20-minute mark. It was a dragon fight. Dig didn't really fight for the dragon. They just took the dragon and then they left. They opted to not take the team fight. This game number 2, completely different Dignitas. They were not all on the same page. You said it, Ravish. They went in one by one by one by one, and Immortals slowly made them undone.
And I have to ask, how much of that do you think comes into the jungle? Is it the quote-unquote willpower of Dignitas, or is it really coming down to just these picks that allow Anda to go in, such as the Jarvan in this instance?
That's a good one. I do wonder, because the Jarvan, a big difference compared to the Trundle that was in game number 1. It's definitely more agency at all stages of the game, because all you need is flag and drag. You need level 2. You can start doing your ganks there. By the time you're in the late game, even if you are not exactly tanky, you still have the Cataclysm, which is going to be a big asset to a team fight. So I can see how the Jarvan was definitely impactful for Anda to be able to make his mark on the map.
And even going into, you know, giving Lorlo like just his like very favorable Dart matchup too, which he's like very proficient on as well. Like, yeah, I think like with Will right now, it's just agency for across the board for both of these teams is definitely going to be the main factor that I'm looking at. The way you go, that's how the way you like move around the map, and who really has the, I would say, like early Rome being able to build off their own early momentum. Because like, yo, Jarvan was cool. He's able to do a lot. Like, it was fantastic. And like you mentioned, level 2, you can kind of do whatever you want. And we know Aphel used to be much of a snowball type champion. He needs a little bit to get going. So answer being to all of this is just give Will Lee Sin. That's it.
Just give him Lee Sin, man.
Just give him Lee Sin. And is this going to influence how we do the pick ban? Because I've noticed that between both the teams, we had Dignitas choosing blue side, and then we had Immortals choosing red side for game 2. So really, between that, are we going to see that change at all, or are we just going to stick to what's been going and see literally 5 games of Dignitas on blue and Immortals on red?
Both teams had success on both sides, so can't really shame them. It seems like for Immortals, they're very happy getting the round 1, round 2, being able to just quickly sweep up that Aphelios and Thresh. It's why they keep going towards that side. And for Dignitas, it feels like they feel very happy trying to get a very powerful pick like the Lee Sin or like the Viego in the early stages of the game.
Well, actually, I am being told that they will be on blue side going into the next game. So we are sticking with the exact same size the entire time. So that's just, you're right, yeah. Like every time, you know, like Immortals are very happy with their R1, R2. They know what they want. And if I am to give, like, you know, like, tell them something, I think the biggest thing you actually to focus on is that if you deny the Thresh from Immortals, I think that'll actually make such a world of difference, because we've seen how impactful Joey can be, bro. His hooks are amazing. The fact that he's kind of landing them just like completely blind half the time, and somehow he always ends up coming out of the darkness with a lantern and saving everybody on Immortal. So that definitely, I think, should be targeted ban if they are to go forward to the series. But yo, considering I got Immortals for this, keep it up. Let Joey have it. You have nothing to worry about. Don't worry.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And quite honestly, Joey's been a real performer throughout this series. So when we think about the future games that are going to be going on, game 3 and beyond, is this still looking like a Dignitas victory, Desterux, or are you starting to get a little shaky here?
I still see it the same way. I did say 3-1. Immortals did take their victory. It is feeling a little bit shaky in the way that they took their draft for this game number 2. I like it when you're able to get Lorlo on something that plays well on weak side, because Viper is someone who's going to challenge you often. I felt like the Shen really did that, really just objective perfectly in game number 1. It's very hard to still be able to pull that in game number 2. You saw the plays that they were able to do over with Immortals, just having the Camille there to set up the ultimatum so Pretty could teleport in and just get the 2v1 that easy onto Lorlo. Those tools worked really, really well. So I'm hoping that Dignitas starts stepping away from some of the Gnar shenanigans and whatnot. Even though there were some great Mega Gnar ultimates from Lorlo in that one, I feel it's not the champion you want to go into a matchup with someone like Viper.
Actually, you know what? I'm thinking here this. It's like, even although the All-Star pick was cool and wanted to go in for just the big wombos and knockouts, if you get something for JJ with a little more agency, like to the con, I think that would be a really nice pairing alongside the Gnar.
Have you
I
seen
think
his
like,
Twitter?
I
Have you seen
mean,
his
like,
Twitter?
look,
He's obsessed with Rakan. He says it
I know.
right there, just straight up.
No, that's what I'm saying, bro. It's right there. Just put him on the racket, and like he's gonna be mad fast about it. Well, Bob and be back and forth, and then like plus you get a lot of CC along with it too, and you're a fast boy, so you can go ahead and match those plays, like I was saying. But I know that my prediction so far is safe. Dignitas got the first win, so that's looks. I guess this is where we come at odds this game. As we'll see who might become the truly superior analyst today, who really has the bigger brain.
I'm just here for League of Legends, man. I want to enjoy some good games. I want to enjoy some good League. Proving Ground Spring was so much fun in the development of North American Amateur. Proving Ground Summer is already just as hype.
And I think it really just has been so back and forth. It's amazing to see so many amateur teams compete so thoroughly with the top teams from academies. Like Wildcard Red that's playing tomorrow, I think is going to be really strong. But do you think that the winner of this series is going to be able to compete with the likes of the Wildcard Red?
Absolutely. I think this is closer than it was last time, which, last time it was up to just no Oregon Cloud9 Academy. Wildcard Red looks hot. The competition is much higher now that a lot of Academy teams have been able to swap out from that pool from Proving Ground Spring, back when we had that going down. So I still think it's still going to be a very hot competition. It's still going to be very close for either of these teams if they go through.
Now go ahead and touch your screen real quick. Just go ahead and touch your monitor real quick. Just feel that burn? That's how spicy the competition is right now. That's how much
red.
Exactly, bro. It's like you can say it's muy caliente, even.
I'm sorry, what does that mean?
Very spiciness.
Oh,
I think that's the overall the breakdown of I believe the translation. But yeah, like you're saying, Destructs, with how close the competition has been, especially going throughout the entire tournament, really it can be any team at all. And that's what I love about all this, right? Just considering how both the Immortals have adapted from facing Dig last time and how Dig have grown by facing all of these teams, it can genuinely go either way. As long as nobody decides to just play some more fun League of Legends, I think we're in for a fantastic series, which I know we're about to get. And I agree. That's all I want as well. Just a good time on my screen in terms of League of Legends.
I'm hoping we get that, and quite honestly, the series have delivered so far. We are very close to Champ Select, folks. We still just have a couple of ready checks to get going, but I have to ask the desk, the Golden Boys that are still here with me, thank you very much. I gotta wonder, what is going on in these players' heads? We have a best of 5 going on, and it's very different from a best of 3. This is a situation that both of these organizations have been through, both of these teams have been through. Is that really going to shift how we go forward in Game 3 and beyond, honestly?
That's one of the fun things when it comes down to these best of 5s, right? Because it's not just a test of, let's just go at it, best of 3, see who's going to be the best. You can always slip up and get that 2-game sweep, and there can always be mistakes here and there. You get a little bit more time to be able to adjust those mistakes, to be able to see what the other team's doing, and do your best to try and counter draft to it. We saw that already with Immortals adjusting their draft and banning away the Lee Sin. Now we're hoping to see that from someone like Dignitas Academy, as they are in the opposite end.
And with the way it's looking right now, right, just in terms of adjustments too, I think what it'll also come down to is maybe Immortals decide to play to a different lane this time too. Maybe they decide to change the matchup as well, because considering what we've seen so far between these two games, it's definitely gone from a little bit of that engage heavy type style to just heavy roaming and heavy dive too. So maybe this one too, we've seen how they consistently evolved. So I imagine although they've unlocked Keith, and maybe they played it pretty this time. Maybe they decide that they want to make sure that he's able to get a lane more so too, because we're talking a lot about him, just how well he's been playing, and considering what we saw before with the LeBlanc, we're give him more of that, and suddenly the game becomes a lot more fun, a lot more IMT sided.
I think that could very well happen. I mean, honestly, we've seen a lot of shifting of playstyles, but I'm most surprised that we've seen the constant focus towards topside, especially in Game 2. I feel like Immortals really managed to push that a lot further. And Dignitas, they seem to play a weak topside, and they're very happy with it. Is that what's going to lead them to victory in Game 3?
I definitely do feel like it. You don't want to challenge Viper in the 1v. You don't want to do something like the Fiora versus Camille matchup against him. Someone who's so proficient in taking these very aggressive 1v1 side lane split push, try and get all the way to the Nexus and more while the other team's elsewhere. You gotta play it safe. The Shen, it was a safe pick. It did the exact job it needed to, and that was part of why Immortals couldn't get started in game number 1. The whole point of that Shen was to not to win the lane, but just to make sure Viper didn't win the lane. You're happy if it goes neutral if you're someone like Lorlo.
Exactly, and because like you were saying about with Lorlo too, it's like, bro, he's fantastic at playing weak cell like that. He knows that Viper wants a strong side matchup. He knows that he's been battling consistently for top lane supremacy. But if he doesn't have to do that, then I find that plays right into Dig's plans. Like, you want to make sure that Will is able to pop off too, and if Lorlo is able to get something like an Ornn, then he has one job. And if he's able to perform to it, then you're feeling absolutely A-okay. If you are on the side of Dig, and considering after that previous game, you're definitely really thinking about, okay, what is our plan going into the next game? Because you definitely don't want to repeat the last time. It would, as I said before, the complete and utter, I would say, adverse of the word bueno as it stands.
All right, well, hopefully we'll be able to get pretty close to the opposite of bueno, as we are very close to Champ Select. Hopefully Tigress and Joshi have been waiting in the wings. I can feel their hunger all the way from the desk, and we'll be switching to them very soon, boys. Final predictions, we're still clear. We're still on the 3-1 train.
Still on the 3-1 train for Dignitas, but I'm happy this matchup is shaping up the way it is.
Yeah, what he said.
Here, well, we'll be swapping over, and hopefully Tigress, Joshi, tell us what we got going on for game 3.
Well, I mean, apparently my tummy's been doing the talking because you can feel our hunger. I'm a little like, what's going on here? You got some insight there, Cage. Welcome back, everybody. Joshi, you hungry?
I am actually hungry for some good League of Legends action coming through. We're not full just quite yet. Like, I think it was Enda they were talking about with the big old pot belly after that one. It's still got a lot more left to go before I'm satisfied.
Yeah, still got some room in there. And for all of those in the audience that may cringe at this, particularly if there's an Emily Rand or Tim or somebody, guess what? We have ourselves a series. It is officially 1v1 between Dignitas and Immortals. And, you know, Joshi, I always like when things kick off to a rockin' start.
We've definitely seen two very different styles of gameplay coming in from both sides. And I think we're going to be continuing to see that play and counterplay coming in between these two teams because they've both kind of shown the kind of things that they are looking to do, and they are both sticking to their guns. We're seeing Dignitas on the blue side for the third straight game, and hey, would you look at that? Their bans haven't even changed just quite yet.
Not quite. Nobody wants to see that Ziggs in action. Just offers too much damage, too much opportunity for those supports to roam, too much strategy that teams like to work with. But on both sides here, as we do kick through the rest of the bans, I do want to just bring some attention to Immortals Academy and the fact that Viper was popping off, but Pretty was popping off too on a consistent pick for himself in that LeBlanc. And when you have these comfort picks coming out of Immortals and it really comes together in that fashion, it really felt unstoppable in certain moments of that game. So Dignitas very wary of that. Choosing to take away the Thresh, though. Nobody likes Joey having that Thresh except for Immortals.
I'm a little bit surprised that they are deciding that Thresh was the problem after Game 2, but not after Game 1, right? We definitely saw a lot of instances where Joey had fantastic dark passages to pull people out of dangerous situations, but that's also something they had the opportunity to do in the first game, and now it does mean that Immortals will have to pick a new bottom lane, at least a little bit. They can still pick the Aphelios, but the Thresh will have to change, whereas Immortals continue to stick to their guns. It's the Twisted Fate, the Lee Sin, and last time it was the Braum again. So is this a Varus pick coming through for Dignitas?
Yeah, that's what they ended up kicking off with as their first pick last time around when that Lee Sin was banned away, and with that being the same exact case this time, that's what they elect to do. And Immortals, as we were talking about, they had the Aphelios and the Thresh locked in as their first two picks here on red side in both of those games. Aurelia has been banned in both game 1 and game 2 as well. So this is the first time that she's been left up on the table. We'll have to see if Immortals Academy end up locking it.
I do like this because it is something that we know both the solo laners can play, but instead they're going to go right on back to the Aphelios. It does need something else to keep it safe, and typically this is the Thresh. The extra mobility is very helpful, but you can also pick a lot of other supports with it, right? It's a little bit less safety, but a little bit more killing power. So the Leonas, the Nautilus can still come through, and people are feeling really spicy, they can go for something else, but they just want to make sure that they always have crowd control that can be used both offensively and defensively. And as I say that, they're throwing me for a spin too.
And there's the Rakan. The desk was talking about it. One of those picks that's still going to offer engage, still have some kind of tankiness building into things like the locket, but also that mobility when he can get back to safety using the battle dance as well. A popular pick for both of our supports, but just across the board of the supports within Proving Grounds. I believe in Proving Grounds is one of the most played for Joey at this time, with the Thresh being banned away in so many of their matches. So usually the one that he defaults to in that regard. And same thing with JJ. When we see the Braum banned away, he has been leaning towards that Alistar.
And this is a bit more of a skill matchup between the Rakan and the Alistar. Typically, a lot of people look at Leona as the #1 support that you often want to be picking into the Rakan. Yeah, you know, you just go in, Rakan comes through, and you're like, sword straight through the Rakan. I'm going to actually hit your Aphelios. But this time it's the Rakan. You got to be a little bit more reactive to a lot of these situations. But you also have a lot of crowd control, and that's something that's already sticking out to me for Dignitas. Every single member on this roster has the ability to get a fight started on their own. They all have crowd control, and that gives them a lot of tools to fight with as they look towards their last 2 picks.
Yeah, from the Headbutt Pulverize on the Alistar, both of the ultimates that Xin Zhao and Varus bring can follow up nicely upon one another. And Viper just going to stick with that Camille. He's played it every single game so far. A pick that we have already talked about being favored by both of the top laners here. And when you don't know what the matchup is going to be, comfortable with it being blind.
And we've seen a bunch of times, this is the other thing that Immortals tends to do. One, they tend to give Viper counterpick, but they also tend to give him this third pick on the red side, right? Where you can then not get immediately counterpicked before you have a chance to ban, and then they protect the pool, right? We've seen this Renekton ban come through 3 times. We saw Gnar banned in game 1, but it was picked in game 2, and Lorlo did have some success with it. So Immortals, they want to make sure that Viper's going to be having a good matchup, and picking up this Camille has so far been working out in their favor.
Yeah, you mentioned that Gnar, and it had a couple 2-player, a 3-player ult. Sometimes it just wasn't matched up in the right time with the rest of the team. A lot of those fights were just split across the jungle too, which made it difficult for follow-up. The Syndra is going to be brought to the ban block here. We saw one play of Syndra earlier on in this series, and not going to be seeing it again. Some jungle bans, though. Dignitas don't want Anda to have a lot of agency, and being that he hasn't locked in his pick just yet, that's where they're going to focus the bans.
Got to make sure that there's not dive buddies available for Viper. And it feels like we have some very obvious themes running through this series right now, right? Make sure that Viper doesn't have anyone to run in with, but this is interesting, right? We just said there was a lot of crowd control available for Dignitas Academy. Olaf, 1, has a great matchup into Xin Zhao, and 2, also ignores all of that crowd control. And with the Trundle taken off the table already, you can't even go with some weird picks in the top lane, right? Lorlo can't pick it in order to reduce Olaf's resistances even further. So Immortals Academy throwing a bit of a curveball at Dignitas right now, and with the Gnar coming through, Dignitas responding in a very standard way. But the Cassiopeia is something Soligo plays very well, but we haven't seen it in quite a long time.
It's something that some other teams have been running somewhat hairy on team. Liquid Academy, for instance, finding success with it, especially when paired with that Lulu in the top lane. But some of the other teams kind of opting a bit more for those that have like roaming potential. And in this case, Soligo being very comfortable on the Azir. While it didn't work out in game number 2, not enough of a reason for them to revert off of it. And with the Gnar here, the Xin Zhao, and that lockdown potential that we talked about, Dignitas Academy priming themselves for that team fight later on if they can get past that safety of the phase. And Immortals, on the other hand, they still love to see Pretty on that LeBlanc. It wasn't banned after his performance in game number 2, and because of that, they're bringing it to the table again.
We're only seeing 3 champions change between the last draft and this one, right? Will was on the Viego, now he's on the Xin Zhao. Anda was on the Jarvan, now he's on the Olaf. And Joey was playing the the Thresh last time, and now he's going to be playing the Rakan. So a lot of similarities between the last draft and this one, but crucially, Enda does not have a dash this time around. He's not going to be able to get over the ultimate if Soligo is able to time it right, because it does just become terrain later on. But crucially, if he pops the ultimate at the right time for Enda, he is not knocked back and just stays in place. So suddenly, Enda has again another big opportunity to look for outplays. He's got a good matchup. We'll see if he can actually use it to his advantage.
Anda and Will, if we're talking about junglers, have been focal points for their teams when on picks like this that can really take care of the fight, get in that outplay kind of mindset and scenario to set themselves up for success as much as possible. And it's a tied up series right now, and some slight variations in the draft for sure, but still ticking to the same sides. Do you believe that Immortals can kind of follow the momentum, being the ones that are on the backside of a win for themselves, to continue suppressing Dig Academy? Or are the slight differences maybe having someone like Xin Zhao as opposed to Viego, who really needs to get that pop off in the team fight, can give Dig a bit more of, just consistency for themselves?
I think Immortals are in a big spot where they absolutely can carry this through, but it's really going to depend on how this early game pans out. Remember, in game 1, whoa, he just ghosts right away?
Ooh. Wants to get there nice and fast, but still has to kind of lead the charge for the rest of the team. Hook shot to lock on to Soligo, forces the flash. Will's all here on the outskirts, but I think he just sees that it's outnumbered, and even with the undertow thrown out for another final slash of HP, Soligo can still get back to Fountain in time.
Okay, well, I was going to say it's going to be super crucial how this early game goes, and Enda already committing Joey in a bit of an awkward spot.
He's got the healing, already had to use a potion. That almost looked like Dignitas were willing to pursue that a bit more, but they decide to save their summoners in this case. A ward drop down here by Immortals upon their invade, so they know that the leash is coming in, and Joey even stepping up to it a little further before deciding to back off.
True, but crucially, we do have to note that Soligo doesn't have a flash available. Now, we've looked at how aggressive Enda has been in both Game 1 and Game 2, and Viper, starting with the E, unfortunately not going to be getting anything off of it because Lorlo also starting with the E as Gnar. That, never happens, for the record. Enda is now going to be in a spot where he has to look really aggressively for some of these early plays in order to make sure that he's going to be relevant throughout this game, because he definitely gets outranged and outscaled later on by both Spawn and Soligo.
I love that Lorlo's focusing on that survivability by making sure he has the mobility to get out of harm's way over in that top side. And in the bot each time, we have seen the continuation of poke, Spawn having the range to be able to throw it back, and Keith, a matchup with which Spawn has seen now for what will be the third time in the row, despite that supportive change. And Keith really does just want to get himself into a solid place for that later game impact. But should be a good one here. Dignitas and Immortals really holding up to the excitement of Proving Grounds as one of them faces elimination.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to get a little in-depth here into the top lane matchup because
you do your thing.
I'll be honest, I am a huge Gnar player. I play this champion way more than anything else over the past 5 years. As we see trades going down in the mid lane, Soligo still has no flash, but the fact that we see the E being skilled from Gnar early on, it starts off with a 22-second cooldown. It is very long. Camille's E is also fairly long, but it's 16, but you can also opt to max it a little bit faster. But crucially, the 6-second difference means that every time Lorlo has to use the E to dodge out on Viper's W or Viper's E is a 22-second window and a 6-second window later on where Viper has his dash where Gnar does not. And it looks like Immortals, where they were thinking about trying to prey on that already. But Joey, you're not in the bush, buddy.
And not quite into the shadows of that bush there. So no play to be had yet on that top side. Glad to have another expert here on the cast today. I didn't know you played that much Gnar.
I play a lot of Gnar. I play a lot of Gnar. It's probably the only champion in League of Legends that I have 1,000 games on.
So you have the plushie, right?
I do.
You
I have the plushie.
Okay.
I got the little action figure, and look at that. Viper going in. But Lorlo you know, knowing the range, now he's got like a 10 to 15 second window where Viper can look to go aggressive when Viper's E actually comes back up. And so this is part of why Viper is having a little bit more success this time than the first one, is because Lorlo doesn't have the same kind of damage, and he's opting to go with the E. The hop gives him a little bit of safety for a brief moment, but he ends up trading it back down the road. So it's a big, interesting counterplay, and right now, JJ hovering towards the top side, expecting Viper to be aggressive.
Wards here in favor of Dignitas. Lorlo going into Meganar, throws out the Q for some additional damage, but Viper seeks that security under his turret, which means that JJ doesn't have any reason to stick around anymore and will be backing himself.
So this is both supports at this point have gone for this big roam that hasn't given them anything. And Keith, he's got a big CS lead at the moment. It's mostly going to equalize here as this wave actually crashes underneath the turret. But it also gives Keith an opportunity to back away, and it gives Joey another opportunity to look for this roam. He already goes straight to mid lane, doesn't have a flash available, but it does create a little bit more pressure, right? So Lego does have the flash available again, so he should be safe. But every single time both these AD carries bounce a wave into the other side of the map, you gotta pay attention to where their supports are going. Joey, again, looking towards the top side. JJ just did this about a minute ago, but maybe Joey can have a little bit more success.
And they truly have been alternating in their timing of rotating towards that top side and roaming, which has given kind of that push back and forth between the CS of those enemy bot laners. And it just shows the fact that there's a lot of truth to what people are saying with the top lane being a focus here. While Immortals have kind of diversified their strategy over the past month or so, being able to find ways to pour resources into the bot lane if need be, a lot of their summer focus has come from the synergy that Viper and Anda bring to that top side, and really tapping into Joey's just love of getting to that side of the map, whereas Dignitas are very aware of that, and many teams have taken the strategy to try and shut down Viper. So JJ and Joey, the Jays of the bot lane, doing their thing across the map. But speaking of that bot lane, a flash forward and a flash response from Keith. Joey goes in for it, but JJ already marked down low. That's first blood, getting the credit onto Joey as the support, but a successful kill indeed.
Nice reaction from Keith. He had to know that was coming. It's typically, you know, something you have to be expecting. FSN Saber talks about this all the time, right? If you can prime yourself to be ready for something, you can react to it a little bit faster. Keith was expecting the flash to come out from JJ, and as soon as he saw the motion, instantly had a flash of his own. It becomes impossible for this Alistar to do anything. That's his way into a fight, but it's also his way out of a fight. And suddenly, locked underneath the turret with the Gravitum gun, with Joey's grand entrance, easy kill pickup for Keith and Joey, and they're going to be able to pick up this big old wave. And it also rewards them with Anda's continuing dominance over the neutral objectives. This is his 5th straight dragon in a row that he's picked up for Immortals.
Which seemed to be one of the biggest changes between Game 1 and Game 2. Just that earlier presence onto Dragon, even when there weren't kills that were happening across, but just taking any opportunity at that pressure. And as you had mentioned, Keith really making sure to respond to JJ. JJ is at the early point in the game where he doesn't quite have that tankiness just yet to be able to take those tower shots effectively. So early action here in the bot lane that did go over towards IMT, which is a great thing to see considering some of the struggles that they had, often losing one for the trade. Dignitas has been able to trade back and forth in a lot of the cases, but not this time around.
I also want to point out the fact that, you know, you say JJ, he's only level 4. He's not currently at a spot where he has access to the ultimate to actually go for a lot of these turret takes. But I also want to point out that because both supports are roaming so much, they're only level 4 to level 6. And that's, to be honest, kind of standard, right? It's not always 2 levels, but it's usually at least 1. Pretty goes in for some damage. But because both AD carries know that there's not going to be any focus on their lane pretty much whatsoever, he goes for a cult.
Joey, when he goes in for that additional damage, falls pretty low, knows that his jungler is nearby, will mark down to about 30% HP, but so is the enemy that is in pursuit of him, that does have that ultimate, that does activate it, but it's not enough for that safety, so now 1-1 on the kill board officially.
Well, that was a thing that just happened. Anda thought he had the damage, and he was just wrong. Like, that's just how that works sometimes, is you think you can do a thing, and if you don't have a flash, you don't have a lot of opportunities for like these big plays, right? But sometimes, you know, you just estimate how much damage your opponents have. Anda thought he could go for Will. Will had the flash available, just runs away, and unfortunately for Anda, it does mean that Dignitas are the first ones to this Rift Herald. They have more members here already. Aphelios looking to potentially come up, but Lorlo, again, they went for a fight last time with no Narbar. I don't think it's as likely to hurt them this time.
Yeah, most of them are clustered around and using the blast zone to get over the wall. Pretty knocks over Lorlo back. Here comes in Viper with the hook shot, but Lorlo did flash over the wall. That's the kill onto Joey. Dignitas getting the 1-for-1 so far. They've lost their jungler, and now the enemy jungler falls once again as well. So a couple of kills in favor of Dignitas following up on that.
And it feels like these fights are a little bit more scattered than what we saw both of these teams going for earlier in the day, right? We really praised Dignitas for their ability to take fantastic fights and their ability to manufacture fights in the first one. Immortals was very willing to go for great fights in the second game. And now it feels like Immortals say, Nar doesn't have a bar. I think that's enough for us to actually go for this fight. Unfortunately, they just didn't have the people there. So League Warrior is the first one on the scene. And we are seeing that because Viper is trying to make some of these plays, but he's not getting the same kind of attention paid to his lane as we saw last time. Lorlo was dove before this point. He's now down about 30 CS, which again, good matchup for Nar. He should be expecting to find this large lead. But at this point, Viper still needs to find some way back in because Lorlo is not getting these gold traded back in terms of kills.
And the equivalence of kill nearly 2 of advantage in gold for Lorlo here against Viper. And the strongest that Immortals was when Viper was able to really get in there and affect a lot of these skirmishes, but walk away with kills for himself. And same with Pretty when those resources were paid by Anda towards that mid lane, but Soligo obviously a bit slippery at times on this Azir in the matchup, which is something that you always have to consider as actually taking our attention down to the spot. Joey just wanted to make his rotation back towards the lane. Luckily, has that mobility that we talked about with this champion to get over the wall, consistently butting heads with Will at this point.
With a minute left up on this next drag, we got to pay attention to how JJ does. He doesn't have ultimate yet.
Headbutts away Pretty, but he's between a rock and a hard place. Will and Soligo are here, but some of the damage was dished out onto the enemy support. Still enough time with 45 seconds on the clock to be able to get back, refresh some of these wards, and get in there and set up for the fight. The Rift Herald, it was Lorlo that had picked up the Rift Herald off of that previous fight, so he's held on to this the whole time and can nicely get some plates in his pocket, bringing quite the crash down onto this top.
And crucially, a couple things are going to happen. One, Lorlo, if he plays this right, will have a Gnar bar that he can sit on. He doesn't need to activate it right away. He can just have it ready. And two, he will have teleport advantage over Viper for this upcoming Dragon fight. So it becomes very difficult for Immortals to try and react to this if Dignitas went to pick it up. And we're already seeing posturing from both teams in the mid lane as to who's going to have mid lane priority, who's going to be forcing the other team to face check in. And Dignitas pushing this wave in, should get a little bit of structure damage, and more importantly, forces IMT to check, and IMT does not want to play.
That bot lane is also pushing the wave up as well, so anytime you're going for that dragon, it's right in your favor. It just offers a lot of security when trying to go for it, and is currently spawned up. Dignitas are the ones to rotate to it. You should be able to burn this down to even up the dragon score.
Well, there you go. It looks to be very favored for Dignitas at this point, right? They get the big range advantage later on. The big divers that we were looking at from Viper and Pretty are not yet accelerated. And as long as Dignitas are able to play to the very standard style of just keeping their backline alive, they should be pretty favored here. But with a teleport coming through from Lorlo, no flash, Viper is still leaving, and it doesn't want to come up towards the top lane. And eventually, Camille does win this. Eventually, right? But it's going to take a long time for them to get all those tools, and it feels like Viper and Pretty are rapidly becoming the primary ways for Immortals to try and find advantages, looking for potential 1-3-1 splits.
And with that turret over in the top side, getting focused down now by Lorlo, you do want to see Viper being able to split in other directions where he can try and make up for some of that gold. Of course, having the opportunity to clear this wave here right now, but it's going to be more difficult for him to extend over on that top side without the security of that turret. So some rotations to maybe be had by Immortals in the near future.
Now, we are still seeing opportunities, as you said, for Immortals to try and find something, but they aren't necessarily looking to take advantage of them, right? Anda needs to make sure he's not falling behind in farm. He's clearing out his jungle, whereas Will, chilling up the top side, has already cleared out most of his jungle, so he doesn't necessarily need to be farming anything, and it's also creating a lot of space for Lorlo to potentially go for a fight. Lorlo has most of a bar. He might be looking at a dive here in a second if Will wants to take it.
Will rotating towards the opposite side of this turret for the dive. Lorlo goes into Meganar form, narrowly missing with the here's the teleport in response, so Viper can get some additional security from the rest of his team. A great outplay right there to sidestep the Wind Becomes Lightning, but over here in mid, Pretty has been marked down low. The root onto Soligo. Unstoppable this time around. The Olaf gets the kill.
Great heads-up play from Viper, instantly trying to leave and make sure he doesn't get hit by that Gnar ultimate. That definitely would have been his death if he didn't dodge out from it. And so, small leads coming back into Immortals Academy. They don't get anything topside, but because Soligo has to commit really hard in the mid lane to prevent the teleport, ends up being a sitting duck after using all of his mobility forward. So, Immortals, you know, they're still behind. The game plan is still a little bit tenuous in order to try and find these advantages, but you will take every little bit you can get. Unfortunately, looks like we might be looking at a rinse and repeat. Lorlo's here, but he doesn't know Anda's around.
Here's the hook shot to directly land on top of Lorlo, working into that raid bar. There it is, lands with the ultimate directly into the wall for the stun to get the kill. Anda has finally arrived, and these hits hit heavy for sure. But Lorlo, does he have any assistance? He does not. Instead, it's Joey here for the rotation, throws down the ignite to make sure that kill is secured. Joey, 2 kills to his name, and Immortals coming out on top there.
It looks like Lorlo was really able to take advantage of a small lapse in communication. Viper says, I want to fight this guy, and Anda says, oh, but these Krugs look really tasty. And so just having that little bit of a small desync is enough for Lorlo to actually pick up the kill. And look at this, Dignitas fully taking control of this northern quadrant of the jungle. There's another Rift Herald to fight over. There's plenty of time before the dragon actually spawns. So Dignitas looking to upset the neutral objective streak that Immortals was actually going for. They've already picked up a dragon. They picked up the Rift Herald. Looks like they're going to be picking up another Rift Herald and trading it for a turret in the bottom lane.
Already a break in some of the trends that we saw in game number 2, where Anda was getting all the dragons. He had gotten both of the Rift Heralds in that previous game, and now Dignitas, despite not getting that first Drake, were able to break up that stacking, able to get a potential second Rift Herald for themselves here, but Immortals have already rotated on over. Pretty is coming from the mid side, and Lorlo is down bot, does not have TP available to him, so he's making his way over towards the rest of the team as well to try and maybe cut off any of the solo laners from Immortals, but it's just a straight up back off of this objective from both sides.
A little bit surprising, but they don't have Lorlo able to come down. Viper and Pretty, going very aggressive.
Calls out the flash from Spawn. No vision into this riverside, so Dignitas can't really pursue this safely, and Pretty and he find their exits.
I'd be backing away right now. I'm a little bit surprised that Dignitas are willing to back all of their members, right? Typically, the rule of thumb is you need like 40 seconds on the clock in order to get to the dragon when it spawns, but Dignitas taking their backs at around 30 seconds, and now they're looking for Lorlo, who still has his block.
Hops on over into the tri-bush, gets the knock-up. There's the charm. Still in pursuit. Lorlo is just outnumbered right here by Immortals. Will is coming from the outskirts in the jungle. Spawn is rotating as well, but cannot make it in enough time. So the top laner falls in favor of Immortals here. But it's continued. When Becomes Lightning ends up hitting over the wall. The Chain of Corruption allows a lot of stacking of the damage onto the Olaf, who has to pop the ultimate. Meanwhile, in the rest of the fight, there's a TP right in the center. And Spawn has found his fate. He tries to get a nice hook onto Soligo. He manages to dash over the wall, and in the backside, Anda ends up falling. So no more jungler on the side of Immortals. The dragon has been up. Flash forward. Viper throws down the Hextech ultimatum onto Will. Nearly gets him down to a shrill and a sliver. But Joey and Viper are already marked down. They have to back off of this fight. Soligo using the Emperor's Divide before he ends up eating it himself. Dignitas still outnumbered. 4 members of Immortals here, but with such a limit in the HP of some of their more utility-based players, they cannot make it over towards this dragon. Lorlo's still here. Nice and pretty over on the bot side.
Ultimately, though, Immortals have to be really happy with that sequence of events, right? They might not realize it, but they've brought the goal back right on back to even. Because it's only the second dragon going over to Dignitas, it's nowhere near as impactful. But this, again, feels like a lot of people just, like, not believing each other, right? Spawn doesn't believe that there's somebody in the tri-bush. Anda doesn't believe that Will can kill him. Soligo doesn't believe that they can kill him if he teleports into the middle of this. But ultimately, a lot of people end up making a lot of small micro decisions, and most of them go in favor of Immortals. And the big thing here is Immortals, they have to make this fight happen really, really quickly, right? Even though it's super risky, there's a lot of things that you got to take into account. They have to do it before Lorlo respawns and teleports back into the fight. It's their only way that they pick up this extra kill, and every bit of gold matters, because now they're within 500 at this point. They can actually look to get Viper and Pretty off the ground. They need to get every bit of gold onto both these characters as possible so that they have real threats onto Soligo and Spawn later.
And one thing that you can always believe, Joshi, is Viper's killer instinct to go in, and Immortals just learning over time to make sure that they can trust that, using the flash to get there into the backline there and ensure that they can trade something in their advantage. So that gold lead starting to slim down, though Dignitas still has a hold of it. That Rift Herald is 19:30 currently on the clock, so a bit of pressure onto either of these teams right now, but might just end up being kind of the center point for both of them to say, you know what, let's back off here.
And again, we are still seeing Dignitas looking to try and do this. Yeah, it has disappeared already as Will does check it. But a similar issue arises with Immortals composition. In these even situations, yes, they are still plausibly okay to take some team fights sometimes if they can find like good flanks and can become winning. But importantly, it's very hard for them to actually go for a lot of these structures. They don't have a lot of range characters to necessarily play with. They are going to get poked out. They're going to get wave cleared again. So it takes them a long time to actually get any of these turrets down. And it's part of why this fight is starting to erupt.
That's some heavy poke onto Anda. Joey goes in, knock up onto Will, but Soligo is here to create distance if necessary, but can hold on to his ultimate. So Immortals still kind of just hovering over in this jungle side, whereas Dignitas, they've already broken out those side lanes because of those two turrets, and it would be very beneficial for them to be able to do the same on mid. JJ turning it around with a headbutt onto Joey. Everybody except Lorlo is here. Lorlo still doesn't have TP. He's just focusing on pushing in that bot lane because this turret is still weak enough on its own here mid. And you know that Viper is pushing over towards top. Also doesn't have TP available to him either. So it's actually really Dignitas right now feeling okay with continuing here in this mid push, but in a fairly safe way. But they do lose that top turret.
It is important to note that not all turrets were created equal, right? This inner turret, if Lorlo is able to get it, is worth 600 gold to him personally, and everybody else gets 50. Unfortunately, not going to be able to get that right now. They do get the 50 gold across every single member, but unfortunately for Lorlo is pushed off of it before he is able to get the local gold. That said, it is still going to be a lot of map pressure that's going to be coming up. We're still seeing a situation where Lorlo is the king of the side lane. It is very difficult for Viper to try and lock him down in long periods of time, and it looks like Lorlo likely building towards the wit's end gives him a little bit more opportunities to dance around Viper's melee champion, as well as gives him some opportunities to potentially fight Pretty later on down the line. So the inner turret going down for the red side of the map, whereas Dignitas only losing their outer turret, does mean that there's a little bit more pressure continuing to mount for Dignitas.
And continuing on kind of how those top laners are doing, Viper getting those chances to kind of shore up that farm, get into a better place to carry the rest of the team as they go into what looks like another team fight. Dignitas have started the Baron. They've already marked it down to half. They've got the control ward in the pit to cancel out what Immortals try to throw down, but they're rotating around the pit right now. Can they try and make any contest of this? Joey split onto the opposite side. It's Viper that hook shots in, targets JJ. That signals for the charm to come through. Pretty onto the back line, onto Spawn. Should be able to burn him down. Lorlo keeping Viper all the way on the wayside, but Will also chunks down. Keeps flashing over to the opposite end. Viper using his set ultimatum. Get the kill onto Dignitas. The Baron is still around. It's still alive and still ready for the taking, which means Immortals can try to shore this up after the triple kill that Pretty had achieved. Taking down Dignitas and taking the Baron for themselves.
A split call from Dignitas turns into a disaster, Gabby. Just when we get the replay, you'll get to see how split they were and what they were actually trying to do. But the Immortals game plan is easy. Kill the backline. But look, Will doesn't necessarily participate in this fight the entire time. He's just zoned away, and he just wants to find somewhere to live. Spawns off in a different side entirely. Soligo is trying to find different fights of his own. Where is the cohesion? Who are they trying to hit? What are they trying to do? Will now trying to finish off the Baron. Immortals says, we don't, we like the Baron, but we're just here to kill you. It becomes very easy to just lock down individual members in these chaotic situations where the Camille and the LeBlanc actually thrive, and Viper trying to make his way out, still has Flash.
Oh, the fire in the eyes of Immortals, though, and whenever Joey is nearby, Viper and the rest of the squad can feel much more secure. And Pretty, yeah, he got 3 kills off of that previous fight. We know what he can do on the LeBlanc and is really trying to accelerate towards that late game strength. Now with Baron buff in tow, Immortals just have a lot of pressure across this map. They've officially taken over the gold lead and are feeling pretty good about themselves with a lot of ultimates at their disposal too. If they do need to break out something, Viper pushing in that top line as well.
And the big part of this, right, we just said they were going to have trouble taking down a lot of the structures, but Baron buff overrides a lot of that wave clear differential, and Keith, as long as he's got this green gun, which is about to disappear, will have the range to safely hit a lot of these structures. But now that it's gone, it becomes difficult for Immortals once again to try and take down any of these turrets, even with the Baron buff. So Dignitas will be able to hold out a little bit here unless Immortals is able to find some kind of flanking fight, unless Immortals is willing to go for some kind of dive. Should be very difficult. I think Dignitas might lose one more structure if Immortals wants to force for it.
And Pretty, a nice chunk and a root onto Will, which just leaves ample opportunity for Anda and Joey to follow up. Anytime those ethereal chains come out from Pretty, he has been getting some great lockdown for the team to follow through on.
Again, Will just didn't believe Pretty there, and he was very quickly proven wrong and made a believer. Pretty was able to blow him up, and this might be the window that Immortals actually need to go for something, because they still have a lot of ultimates. The only thing they're really missing, they get a root.
Chain of Corruption, look at that blast, followed up with the Gnar ultimate to secure this kill onto Keith. Now Dignitas see an open opportunity to use the Emperor's Divide. Soligo going into stasis to keep himself protected, but he is still targeted by Viper. Spawn taken out of the fight, chunked down way too low, and has to seek the security of his turret, but it's a 2-for-2 trade, taking off some of those Baron buffs.
Well, at the end, it was still just the one turret, right, Gabby? I said they would get one more. They got one more. It ends up being a bit of a back and forth. But now we're going back to the Dragon. The Baron buff is gone. It just expired. You see 3 minutes next to the next Baron. That means the previous one is gone. But Keith just ends up getting caught here, and that's kind of it, right? Viper and Pretty need to look for ways to create threats, and unfortunately they aren't able to get into a position to create a threat before Keith ends up getting caught here. And suddenly, without Keith, without that backup damage, it becomes very hard for Pretty and Viper to necessarily be aggressive. They're able to try and find some good damage onto Soligo. They do trade a kill back, but it's the kind of thing where if they had a little bit more time to set up, they probably could have found a bigger win. Instead, we're just tied 2-2 dragons, which means if anybody gets a soul, it means we're going to be playing for a lot longer.
ADC is super important for the fight. Who would have thought? The previous big team fight when, Pretty had isolated Spawn and he couldn't do nothing about it. Then Dignitas fell, and now the great ultimate from Spawn to isolate Keith and get him out. You saw the way he tried to get an ultimate off just to be able to help the rest of IMT, but couldn't. In the end, though, IMT, like you said, they still got the objective. It was still a 2-for-2 trade. And that's a lot of value from this Baron buff. Now bringing the pressure over towards this bot lane. A slight wave for themselves. Another one ushering in. And the majority of IMT circling this to force Jay and his teammate back.
There you go. You just get access to the sides. You threaten to dive anybody who actually shows up. And Dignitas not able to present in for Soligo. Now actually looking to be pushing up in the top lane. Does have teleport, and the scary thing here for me is Viper and Pretty both going to be pretty happy to actually split into him, right? So Soligo can't stay here for that much longer. Just going to be pushing this out, and as a teleport comes through from Pretty, look at where Viper is. Soligo might have to use a teleport of his own. Whoa, that was weird.
A little oddness there, but speaking of Soligo up here, Viper looks like he wants to join this cup of tea and make it a 2-for-1. Emperor's Divide to push him away, but the hook shot's good. uses the stasis on the side. Meanwhile, the rest of the team is fighting over towards this riverside. Pretty becoming the target of Lorlo. Throws out the chain from this LeBlanc. Now Viper is zipping over towards the rest of his team. The headbutt in from the Alistar. Flashes in to get the knock up. But Dignitas, they've got the security of this tower too. He's taken down Anda, and right now are currently standing strong. You notice that right there in the bush, there's a back from a certain Immortals member. As Camille has to heal back up right now, but it's Dignitas continuing to push onto this turret. Immortals don't look like they've backed off just yet.
I don't feel like Immortals should feel super uncomfortable just quite yet. Olaf is always helpful, but isn't the most crucial member of their team fight. And we are still seeing, as long as Immortals can get a situation where Keith is able to hit, they can still take these fights. Unfortunately, he got split off in that last one, and now as Dignitas are here, they don't control the pixel brush, which gives Immortals a lot of fog of war to potentially play with, and this allows Britty and Joey to find JJ.
JJ over in the back, immediately collapsed upon. Immortals, oh no, they feel pretty good about that pick. Look at the damage that's already been ushered onto Dignitas, and losing their support, they know they cannot commit to this Baron. Can they back? What can they do about this? Lorlo goes in, ushers a flash from the enemy ADC into stasis. Two members go, one on each side, and even a root over here onto Viper, but he zips back in. All of this effort just have two taken down onto Dignitas' side. Immortals continue with the action. Can he power through? Not so much. Even Bloodstone isn't going to save you. Teleporting over into mid lane. They're able to just chunk right through this. An ace for Immortals, Joshi. These explosive ends to these games.
And again, this is all what it comes down to. You gotta play around Nars bar. They waited for Lorlo to get desperate to use his ultimate before the fight ended. He tries to get it. He doesn't really catch anyone. Keith is able to keep himself alive, and even though he dies, he still has enough damage. And now, Immortals, they don't even care about JJ. They're just gonna hit the turrets.
Nope, JJ's doing his best diligence as the support and the only one alive for Dignitas to hold his own under these turrets, but Immortals' force is way too strong. After refreshing their ace on this Dignitas squad, Immortals put themselves 2-1 in this series. We're gonna kick it to another break, everyone. Soon enough, the action continues.